Now to our next topic on the Rush Hour Roundtable. A Houston pastor is facing criticism for his sermon on Sunday. Dr. Ed Young's sermon to the Second Baptist Church started with outlining Houston crime statistics of this year's murders and robberies. The pastor saying, quote, Houston is one of the 2 or 3 most dangerous cities in the world to live in. So here's a fact check. According to Datalytics, Houston came in at number 4 in the U.S. on its list of highest murder rate. And Pastor Young putting the blame for the rise in crime on what he calls, quote, left-wing progressives.
If Houston and Harris County is to survive, we had better throw those bums out of office. They are not doing their job that we have called them to.
All right, now this is certainly not the first time in history the church has served as a gathering place for political movements. Of course, black churches played an enormous role in the civil rights movement in our country. So panel, is the pulpit a place for politics? And who gets to decide what is appropriate and what is not? So, of course, we do have a resident theologian. So, Candace, I will toss it over to you to kick it off.
So here's the truth, right? The personal is political and the personal is theological and the political is theological, right? So we have always been engaging in political dialogue and commentary in our religious spaces. What has happened in recent time that has made this much more problematic are the ways that we have ascribed certain kinds of behaviors and personalities and demonized people on either sides to say that if you are a Democrat, you are a raging liberal who cares nothing about this country. And if you are a Republican, you are a conservative who does not care at all about the least of these. That's a problem, because the truth of the matter is that forever we've had a diversity in our congregations. And we need to get to a place where we can honor that, yes, there are pastors and there are communities that speak specifically to issues that plague communities, but we have to get to it and have conversations that do not attack either side to suggest that in some ways you lack a certain amount of humanity and dignity if you ascribe to a political party.
So should politics be kept out of the church then?
That it's impossible, right? And I think that that's a part that we have to be honest about, is that your morality it has a direct impact on how you move in the world politically. And so we can have these separation of church and state, and these are our conversations that do matter around legalities of what pastors can and should be able to do legally. But in essence, we do have to recognize that churches have always been spaces in which politics and how we should move ethically and politically in the world have always been infused with theological conversations and in sermons and in Bible studies and the work that churches have always done.
Well, so Candace mentioned the legality there. Aaron, before we kick it over to you, many do oppose Young's sermon. They are calling on the IRS to investigate the church's tax status. According to the IRS, the law defines a church or charitable organization as, quote, one which does not participate in or intervene in any political campaign on behalf of any candidate for public office. So Aaron, do you think that Pastor Young violated this law?
I haven't heard his full sermon, but just given that excerpt of the law you showed me and what I heard from him, I don't believe so, because he didn't specifically endorse another candidate or policy position. But it's very funny because the White House just announced today that Vice President Harris is going to Houston on Thursday to speak at the National Baptist Convention. So there's very clearly an overlap between church and state. We're seeing it in this White House right now. And those who decide whether or not a sermon is worthwhile, a church is worth attending, and fits the morality and the goals of your life, that's up to each parishioner. I go to a much more conservative Catholic church than ones I've gone to in the Northern Virginia area where I live. And not only is it closer to my house, but it's also closer to my values as a Roman Catholic my entire life. That is up to me as a person and as an individual. He's not campaigning for a specific candidate, but we're about to see the vice president walk into the National Baptist Convention and likely deliver politically based remarks to a congregation. So where does that fall within the legality of all of this? Is she doing it on her political time or on the official side? You never really know with the Biden-Harris administration, because last night the president stood up in front of a very creepy red wall, gave what he said was an official speech, but was very clearly politically motivated. So when it comes to the lines and the legality of things and having the IRS investigate people for their status because it is an opposing political or ideology than yours, that's where things become dangerous, because we have seen the IRS weaponized against conservative-based organizations before.
We absolutely have, and that's really the threat here. Look, at the end of the day, if you don't like the sermons, if you don't like the political perspective of whomever is speaking, you don't have to go. And of course, there is that risk that any pastor takes on if they're going to get political. But I'm imagining, in the vast majority of these cases, that they're doing it with the right intent, that they see a problem that's happening in their community. They care deeply about the people who are sitting in that church, and they're speaking out on behalf of life. And in this case, whether it's in Houston or anywhere else, they're seeing an increase of violence, and they are connecting the dots, as a lot of us have, to certain political movements. It's not inherently ideological to call out a policy that's coming from one particular ideology, because you can do the exact same thing on the right. We can point to some bad policy that leads to some bad outcomes. It's not inherently political in the traditional sense of how we talk about politics. They're doing the right thing in this case. I'm more concerned with anyone who wants to send the IRS after a church the same way I would if they did that towards a mosque or a temple.
Okay, so I want to add another caveat to this conversation. There's an outspoken pastor, Greg Locke of Tennessee. He made headlines recently. Candace is laughing there for his political statements. He claims he gave up his tax-exempt status so he can speak freely. Take a listen.
And I dissolved our stinking 501c3 in this church, because the government ain't gonna tell me what I can and what I can't say. So IRS, we don't need your stupid tax-exempt status. You can put it in a bag and burn it in your front yard for all we care.
All right, that was Pastor Greg Locke there. Now, NewsNation could not find his church listed on the IRS website. So should churches or pastors who maybe do want to be more outspoken about politics follow suit and revoke their tax-exempt status, Tracy?
You know, and I'm actually of the Jewish faith. So, you know, I'm a little bit different in that I don't attend a church. But, you know, it's funny. We actually just left our temple for they weren't actively involved in politics. But to really everyone's point, from a moral perspective and curriculum perspective, we didn't like the way that they were leaning, and we took it upon ourselves to find another place. But I do think that any religious institution, like we mentioned, you know, mosque, temple, church, I do think if they are going to actively support a candidate, which I don't think was done in this case, but if they're going to actively support a candidate, they really do need to lose their tax-exempt status, because that just plain and simple is the law.
Candace, I saw you kind of chuckle when we mentioned Greg Locke. Before we wrap up this convo, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
You know, I mean, he's funny to me. I mean, and I think that that's the most, as my grandmother watches this, respectful that I can be when speaking about him. But I do think that we have to be very cautious of the ways that even as we are pushing people to think about the world that they want as religious leaders and as religious teachers and thinkers, we have to be very cautious about how we are forming, you know, our any parishioner. And if we are forming parishioners to believe that there is something fundamentally and inherently wrong with you because of what side of the political party that you lean on, then we need to have different conversations, right? And I mean, and I think it's funny because, you know, this is not the first, you know, presidency that has had a vice president or a president go to a Baptist convention. You know, I think unlike our former president, should Kamala even name a book in the Bible, she'll get it right. Unlike Trump, who didn't know that 2 Corinthians.
I'm sure they'll
is
prep her
actually
right before she goes, like they do every time she speaks.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but I do
job.
think. You know, I do think that we'll
I'm sorry, but
actually
you can't take the position in the same breath. I'm sorry, you can't in the same breath talk about how churches and any church leader has to be careful about not just condemning someone because of their personal ideological beliefs and then immediately question someone's religious beliefs. You just can't do that because you don't happen to like the guy.
I didn't question his religious beliefs. I didn't question his religious beliefs. I said that she would actually know what the scripture actually is. Like, I mean, there's a difference between knowing something and pandering to the people who you want your vote to be. And we saw a lot of pandering and a lot of dishonesty around that in the last 4 years that we had of our presidency. So we need to be honest about that.
The good thing about Vice President Harris is she never panders. And that's something that I personally look at her and I'm inspired.
I have actually never said that. But if we are going to have a conversation about the ways that people have pandered and taken advantage of religious institutions, then I do think that we need to not act as if it just started happening in a Biden-Harris administration.
I will say, if we were to take the pandering out of politics, period, on both sides, I don't think we would have much of a political situation. And that's just the truth, you know. All politics pander. All right, excellent discussion there, panel. Still to come. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnation.now.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.